Hi everyone, I'm Jeff Monroe from Middlebury, and I am almost done with the collector's tour in the fall of 2024. I've got two collectors left, and they're both really different than anything I've shown you before because they're both located intentionally in urban areas. This is Dust 10, which is on the roof of a building on the University of Utah campus in Salt Lake City. The other day, when I was describing the concept of a critical zone, I mentioned that it was this zone of intersection between geology and hydrology and ecology, et cetera, and society. And I think that's important to remember. Humans and human activity is part of what's going on in the critical zone. So, with that in mind, it made sense to deploy at least some of my collectors in developed areas close to large population centers. And Dust 10 right here in Salt Lake City fits the bill. Interesting dust in this location, high deposition rates, distinct chemistry, even a distinct color. I think all of that can be explained by the proximity to roads and developed areas and industry and so on, which you find in a heavily urbanized area like this one. I talked a lot earlier in the tour about all the things that dust delivers to the mountains, helping soil fertility, for instance, and helping build soils in the first place. Dust can also bring things which we might be a little bit more concerned about, lots of metals, for instance, and there's been considerable amount of work looking at the metal content or the overall chemistry of dust here in Salt Lake City to try and understand whether it's an issue at all for human health, particularly with proximity to the Great Salt Lake, which is rapidly shrinking, exposing a large area of what used to be underwater and now is potentially vulnerable to being blown around by the wind. It was a really interesting study that a colleague of mine, Annie Putman, with the US Geological Survey published a few years ago, looking specifically at the composition of dust in Salt Lake City and comparing it with the demographics of who lives where, different parts of the city, where incomes are higher, where incomes are lower, et cetera. And as you might imagine, the exposure to dust varied with position, and the exposure to the type of dust varied with position. There were some areas that had higher contents of certain metals than others, which I thought was a really interesting way of diving kind of at a deeper level into understanding what, in this case, the dust system might be doing to people, or what risk it might be posing to people, or how people are interacting with the dust. So I'm going to empty Dust 10 now. It's hot here on the rooftop, so I'm going to get that done as quick as I can and get back down into the shade. And after this, I've got one sampler left, which is also in an urban setting down in Provo on the campus of Brigham Young University. I plan to go there tomorrow morning, so stay tuned. If you've been with me this long, you can do one more and we can finish this together. Thanks to the University of Utah Department of Meteorology for allowing me to deploy this collector here. Thanks to you for watching. And as always, thanks to the National Science Foundation for supporting the Dust Squared project.